Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Notes series on White Plume Mountain as I DM my party of intrepid adventurers through White Plume Mountain from Tales from the Yawning Portal, which has updated several classic dungeon crawl adventures to 5th edition at my friendly local game store. If you're watching for the first time, I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy it. If you're a returning viewer, again, thanks. Really appreciate it in this video series always, generates a lot of feedback and stuff like that. So I enjoy doing it, and it seems to be helpful to folks out there. So with no further ado, let's get into viewer feedback, and then we will jump right into what happened in the most recent session. So I'm going to put on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback here, and let's take a look at what we could see. So first of all, Lee Williams said, "It would be neat to have the rival party sneak up and steal from the main party while at rest. Maybe attack the party and have the thief steal the backpacks." She also said you could also have this rival party something whose leader is a red. You could have this rival party with a leader is a red wizard, and they're able to act against the party with meta knowledge. And so there's a couple things going on here. One, Lee's referring to the fact that I introduced this sort of rival adventuring party, incredibly generic adventuring party, to sort of add a sense of urgency and a little bit of comic relief to the adventure. They're not in the book. It's just something that I threw in there, basically to keep the party, the main party, from just going back to the village and just staying there for days on end or weeks on end or whatever. I really want to be the sense of urgency. You need to get back into the dungeon, and one way of doing that was have this rival party show up who's like, yeah, we heard the Black Razor's been found, and we're going in too, kind of thing. So the other thing she's referring to is something, it's just one of those things that, is a minor thing, but it's grown bigger in the story, which can happen in role-playing games. That also happens with people who are writing novels or short stories or movie screenplays or something you think will be minor, kind of takes a life of its own. And one of my players came up with this thing in their character background that they were an escaped slave of a red wizard of Thay, and they have this tattoo on their arm because of that. Discussion: how do we get rid of the tattoo? What's the tattoo about? I've done some research on my own. I've talked to the player. People watching these videos have given input. But one of the things that's come up is possibly the Red Wizards of Thay could just be scrying on this player in the party like crazy because of this tattoo. And here the party is inside White Plume Mountain recovering some of the most legendary weapons around. So that could definitely come into play. Lee, as far as having the other party steal from or interfere with the party in any way, somebody else actually about the same time mentioned that, I think maybe on Facebook, and it's not a bad idea. It's just not something I'm personally going to do, mainly for time. I'm really trying to get White Plume Mountain wrapped up, and so we can get back and out of the abyss. White Plume Mountain was supposed to be a very, minor halftime show between Out of the Abyss parts 1 and 2, and it's taken longer than I expected. I'm enjoying it. My players are enjoying it, but I do want to bring us to a finish so that we can get back to Out of the Abyss. The other thing is, if you in White Plume Mountain, unlike other dungeons, if you get your food stolen, you could have, maybe a cleric of appropriate enough level to summon food and water, but B, you can, this adventure is designed from the very beginning, even back in the 70s, that you can leave, go back to the village, and come back in fairly easily. So it might not have the impact that other dungeons might, like if you were in the Tomb of Horrors or Undermountain or something like that. But I really appreciate the feedback, Lee. Thanks so much for watching. So, Scrage Grimclaw wrote in a couple of times. This thing he's talking about, we were talking about my house rule with cover, and if a character or creature is providing cover to another character, what's the possibility of being struck if you're providing cover and the target is missed. And I went and looked, and he had said at one point, he said, I think that uh, that allies don't provide cover. And I went and looked and couldn't find that. And he said that he went and researched it, and evidently it's from 4th edition, not 5th edition. So Leonardo Matthias wrote in also on this house rule and said there's rules for hitting cover in the Dungeon Master's Guide, page 272. He said your house rule is not far from what it is in the book. The only change is that if it falls into the range of hitting cover, it must also be enough to hit the AC of the cover. So my rule is a reminder, if creature A is providing cover to creature B, then I consider it half cover, and creature B gets a +2 AC bonus. So if the ranged attack or whatever on creature B misses within the range of the cover, in this case misses by 1 or 2, then creature A, sorry, I know this is confusing, creature A who is providing the cover would therefore be struck because the attack missed within the range of the cover bonus. So the Dungeon Master's Guide just takes it a step further and says it must also be enough to hit the AC of the cover, which is fair enough. Because if you're wearing like plate mail or something like that, even though it hits you, maybe it didn't get through. But I think just for, because I've been doing it so long this way, I'll probably stick with my house rule way of doing it. But thanks, Leonardo, for the input there. Now, Scrage Grimclaw wrote in again on Druids, and by again I don't mean again, not Scrage. I appreciate all the viewer comments. I'm just saying he's got more than one comment on this video, and he's got a lot of really interesting notes on how he handles Druids, because I made a comment on a previous video. It's like, man, this Druid seems kind of, it's a beast Druid or whatever, and it seems really powerful. So I went and researched it a little bit, and I talked with my player who's playing the Druid, and I'm comfortable that there's enough checks and balances and stuff like there that as written it's not OP, but on the face of it was like, man, that seems OP. Now Scrage put some notes in here that I recommend that you go check out on video 14. I don't have time to go through them all here in the video, but he kind of came up with some ways that as a DM he works with his player that is a Druid. One of the things is, I'll go through what he does. I won't read everything. One is that they made a list of things that can be turned into creatures. So it's actually a list. This is the list of things you can turn into. The other, and this is interesting, also that made the conjure animal spells random. So that's kind of interesting. You'll conjure an animal, but you don't know for sure which one you're going to get. And then he also said that you should note that even though Druids have a lot of hit points because of the shape change ability, their AC is very low. And if a hard-hitting creature like Quesnif, and he's talking about one of the guardians or the guardian of Black Razor in White Plume Mountain, is focusing on the Druid, they're not going to stand a chance in beast form. Quesnif took his Druid down in his game from 102 hit points in 2 rounds. Although there was some high damage rolls and a lucky crit. So what he's saying is just because there are a lot of hit points or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that they're OP. So I really appreciate the feedback on that, Scrage. Rob Plummer said, laugh out loud, I choked on my drink when you mentioned that guy and his Velociraptor. Okay, important safety tip. Don't choke and die while watching Shane Plays. Somebody else said that they watch Shane Plays on the couch, and sometimes they just kind of fall asleep. And they didn't mean that in a bad way. They just have stuff on in the background, and they take a nap on the couch. So Shane Plays is also one of the extra added benefits is that it's soothing sounds that you can nap to and relax to. So just more of the many benefits of Shane Plays. This player, some of the players always want to roll up new characters during a campaign. And Rob said he probably wouldn't allow it unless the player was absolutely not having fun with the character created. However, multiple times would not fly. He said, I guess a way to curtail it would to bring them back in at a much lower level. Yeah, that's a thought. Great video again, Shane. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Yeah, the thing is, this player, I think a lot of times it's not so much that they're not having fun with their current character. They're just always wanting to tinker, and they're always thinking about character ideas and this and that. So they're always wanting to try new stuff. And, I have kind of talked to them a little bit and said, you know, we got to calm down on that a little bit. And in fact, I said, I've allowed it a little bit more in White Plume Mountain because there's kind of a built-in narrative reason. You've got the guild sending release groups because there's this massive expedition going on, the guild they belong to. But this last session, I said, when we go back into Out of the Abyss, the character you take is the character you have, unless, they die or something crazy happens. And, if it's obvious that somebody suicides a character, I will penalize for that. In fact, the last time somebody obviously suicided a character in my campaign, they wasted like 40 minutes of everybody's time in a session. And then they immediately pulled out their new character. And I said, not tonight, you're not. I said, you're not playing that character tonight. We'll talk about it. And they got quiet for the rest of the session, and then they never came back. And to be honest, I don't miss them. So that's as honest as I can be about it. Okay. And then Rob said, I don't use a special home rule for hitting someone if you miss while they're providing cover. I just allow the players to be granted cover if they're behind someone. I do the same for the enemy as well. Fair enough. Yeah. Again, my stuff is a house rule, and I'm curious. I wonder in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I wonder if that's even an optional rule. Let's take a look, or if that's actually, the rule. Let's look at what Leonardo said below. He said, Dungeon Master's Guide, page 272. Let's take a look. Hitting cover. Yeah, it doesn't look random. I mean, it doesn't look optional. It just looks like a rule. So I guess my house rule is the rule, except that, I don't require the AC to be overcome for the cover to be hit. Okay. Let's see, going back up. All right. Kevin Braun said, you ever going back to Out of the Abyss? And yep, Kevin, we're going back to Out of the Abyss as soon as White Plume Mountain wraps. I'm going to guess within 2 to 3 sessions. That's my guess. Very possible the next 2 sessions will wrap it. Don't know for sure until it actually happens, though. But we're going back into Out of the Abyss. It's been the plan from the beginning. Okay. And then Ethan said, and I had asked him, because he also runs, he's Anti-Heroes Anonymous on YouTube, if you want to go check out his streamed games. They had left White Plume Mountain before finishing it, and I just said, I'm just curious why. He said, my players wanted to go back to our main story because White Plume Mountain was taking longer than expected. So they did 3 2-hour sessions to get 1/3 of the weapons. But they had to take a several-week break in between, so it felt longer. Said they were having a great time, but this made Ethan feel really good, and I would feel good too if I was Ethan. He homebrews stuff, and they wanted to get back to his homebrew content. They really enjoy his homebrew content. So there you go. I don't homebrew very often, personally. I'll homebrew one-shots, but to be honest, I mean, it's difficult to find time in my life to homebrew and world build an entire campaign or series of adventures. And to be quite honest, I enjoy the pre-written stuff. I like running it. I have no problem running it. Uh, I like homebrew. I've played in some good homebrew stuff, and it's fun to homebrew. Uh, I don't get into is homebrew better than pre-packaged material, if you will. I think that's subjective, and I think it's a bit snobbish, personally, to go, well, only homebrew or only the stuff that Chris Perkins writes. I think it's fine either way. Whatever your party enjoys, go for it. Like I said, I have homebrewed in the past. I think the last time I homebrewed something was a Thanksgiving game, Thanksgiving week, where I homebrewed that they had to track down a dire turkey, and that was fun. But as far as consistently homebrewing every week, I just don't have time. But I play the Greyhawk Initiative test game. In fact, go look for that video I just put out on the Greyhawk Initiative playtest system from Mike Merle's. The game I played in was homebrew for that, and it was a lot of fun. So anyway, okay, enough on homebrew. I'd be curious to hear from you, though, out there as a player or DM. Do you prefer pre-written stuff, official stuff, or homebrew? I'd like to hear that. Okay, let's see. It's 14. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I think that Rob said something else. Yeah. Oh, dang it. Rob said something else. No, Ethan did. Ethan said, I'm very intrigued. No, he's talking about a different video. This is stuff from the Greyhawk Initiative video. Basically talking about re-rolling initiative every round versus rolling it once and leaving it static. I'm seriously considering, not just because of Greyhawk Initiative, that's how they do it, but because I like it in general, and that's how Castles and Crusades does it. I'm strongly considering, even in the regular D&D initiative system, re-rolling every round because it adds some spontaneity to it and a little bit more drama as far as, there's a different strategy, and like I know I'm going to go on my round every turn, or my turn every round before that guy, to he might go before me next time. So how does that change my strategy? Um, Bill Hart said, love you going through White Plume Mountain as a DM. I'm actually DMing through the entire Tales from the Yawning Portal, start to finish. I know somebody else who's doing that. They're running the whole thing as one long campaign, and the book even mentions you can do that. The adventures are specifically designed to increase in levels. So you can start, I think there's 7 adventures in Tales from the Yawning Portal. You can start at the beginning and go all the way to the end as one long campaign. I love hearing about White Plume Mountain. Love playing and DMing it when I was a very young teenager. I've only DM'd homebrew, here we go again with homebrew, for years, but it's pretty cool sharing these old school dungeon crawls with my players that never got to experience it. Thanks for the work you've done with your videos, and keep up the great work. And Bill said, Bilbo, the DM1 of the original DMs from 1977, and still rolling. Good job, Bill. And there's a fist bump from me to you. Yeah, we're both, I think we're pretty much the same generation. Glad to hear you're still out there knocking it out, rolling. And thanks for watching my video and commenting on it. A lot of the reasons why I'm doing White Plume Mountain and there's other adventures I want to run. I played a lot of D&D growing up, but a lot of the classic stuff that everybody refers to, I didn't play it growing up. I've heard about it. I've read about it. I know of it. But, some stuff I didn't, some stuff I did, some stuff I didn't. And White Plume Mountain was never one of the ones that I played as a kid growing up. So I'm kind of scratching my kid's itch, and sending a love letter back to my younger self by doing White Plume Mountain. And I might do some other stuff with that too. I really want to play a classic first edition AD&D campaign set in Greyhawk. I'm very serious about doing that, following the rules of first edition AD&D. Okay, anyway, that's it for the that's it for the commentary on, or the viewer feedback on episode 14. So let me take off my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we'll get into what happened in the most previous session. All right, so a couple of notes. What I try to do is kind of give notes in addition to the blow-by-blow. For what happened last week, whether in the adventure or as a DM. So first thing that happened last week is we had a player that at the beginning of the session said, hey, I have something to share, and I've got to move unexpectedly. And I'm not going to go into this player's personal business, but they got basically put in a very tough, unexpected, unfair situation, which kind of really angered me on their behalf. It's their business, not mine, but still, I felt bad for them, and they had to move. Like, woke up one day and within 24 hours, the next day they got to go. They just got to put back in a bad spot. So that'll happen as a DM. You can cultivate a party and a group and players and friends, and real life will intrude. So I'm sorry to see this player go. I do have some mixed feelings. One, I'm genuinely very sorry to see him go. He joined our group as somebody who was absolutely fresh to tabletop role-playing, came from a video gaming background, and it was interesting to see him learn and grow, and to help him do that as a tabletop role player, because the mindset of like playing Skyrim doesn't necessarily translate to the mindset of playing D&D in a group setting at a table. And he did a fantastic job of kind of adapting and learning, and very excited about it. Was really turning into a diehard kind of D&D player. So I'm sorry to see him go, and he's a nice guy. But also, we got to the point, I had an old player come back who had left, doing all kinds of weird stuff with my hands today. Anyway, and I'm up to 8 players every week, which is a lot. I can do it. I've had 10, 11, 12 before because I run on behalf of the store. but it does put extra pressure on me as a DM to keep up with all those players and their backstories and to make sure the encounters are fun and challenging but don't take forever and just all these things. So from a purely analytical, unemotional standpoint, I'm not going to cry about going back to 7 players on, but on a personal standpoint, I'm very, very sad to see him go. And he said some really nice things. He complimented me as a DM and as the group, and was seemed genuinely thankful for us helping him to learn how to play D&D, and talking about how great of a DM I was, and how everybody helped him, and all, and I was like, hey, every DM's different. You'll find other DMs that you like some stuff they do better than I do, and then you'll like some stuff I do better than them or whatever. But I mean, he was genuine, was really thanking us, and seemed very heartfelt. So it's kind of a reminder to me that this game can be more than just a game. It's a social thing, and you don't always realize the impact you're having on other people, good or bad. So it's good to have that reminder. And Gerald, I loved having you in the group. I loved your enthusiasm. I'll never forget 1v1. So it's such a fun night that night when you came in for the first time and just went berserk with your enthusiasm. So, as I told you before, if you're visiting back in this area, or if you move back, there's always a place for you at the table, no matter how many people are in the group. Okay, so we'll miss you, Gerald, and thanks for being part of the vanguard of the eye. So that's just one of those things that happens in life. You will lose or gain players unexpectedly due to real life. Sometimes, I've had players leave that I was like, see, I didn't say this to them, but I'm like, see ya, I'm glad they're gone. But not this guy. So Gerald, we'll miss you. Okay. Next thing I want to point out is this is something that came up in the combat later in the session. This was kind of a, you get in your head canon how spells or abilities or stuff work because of previous editions, or even just because you've gotten it wrong, but you've done it that way so long that, it's in your head. Lightning Bolt, the spell, does not bounce or reflect in 5th edition. It used to. I don't know which edition that stopped. But, I went and looked it up in 1st edition here. And, Lightning Bolt, it has a certain range and a width that it'll extend out. Boom, that's a lightning bolt coming right at you. And if it encounters an obstacle that it can't punch through before it finishes its area, in the past, like I said, I don't know what edition this stopped happening, but it's just always kind of been in my head, it'll reflect back. 1st edition, it would definitely reflect back towards you. Up to and including you could get caught in your own lightning bolt, or your allies could get caught in your own lightning bolt. That's not the case with 5th edition anymore. And in 1st edition, and maybe others, if your recipient is wearing metal armor, they could take some additional damage. I don't think that's the case with 5th edition lightning bolt. So just wanted to point that out. So what happened was the party, now we're getting into the blow-by-blow of the last session. They were right at that sort of elbow where they could, it's kind of the corridor was going north, and then it also split east, and they could have either continued north towards the blast. I don't think blast doors is the right word. The what do they call them? The flood doors, and ultimately the area where Wave, the last legendary weapon, is, or they could split east and go towards this very bizarre but very fun and very retro, old school type encounter in D&D, and they decided to go east. Now, I don't know why they decided to go east. Now, one thing, because I kind of wanted them to go east, right? Because it's a fun encounter, and I really wanted to run it, but they didn't have to. But what I said, when you went northwest, Black Razor ultimately ended up being south. And I said when you went northeast, Black Razor, ultimately you had to go north to get to Black Razor. To Whelm. And I said, I'm not saying that's the case with Wave, but, that's, and I was very subtly trying to kind of plant the thought that, maybe going north is, and yeah, that's being a naughty DM. But anyway, uh, and I'm not sure that's why they went east, but that's why they went east, and I wasn't complaining. So they went to Area 11, which is the spinning cylinder, which is just so weird. All right, so let me read this to you. The stone corridor changes abruptly to a spinning cylinder. This is on page 101 in Tales from the Yawning Portal. The stone corridor changes abruptly to a spinning cylinder, apparently made of some light-colored material. The inner surface rotates rapidly. It is painted in a dizzying black and white spiral pattern, and it glistens as if coated with some substance. Now, one of my players went, the last time we were in a room where stuff was coated, it went bad for us, and he's talking about the frictionless room trap. And that's not the same coating substance, but it was interesting they made that connection in their head. So the 30-foot long cylinder is 10 feet in diameter and spins counterclockwise at about 10 feet per second. The inner surface is covered with slippery oil. It is possible to slide through the cylinder by propelling oneself along the floor, but walking through this area without being knocked prone requires a successful DC 20 dexterity acrobatics check. Okay. And then just watching through the arrow slit at the end of the passage, fully east, is an alert guard. Now we're getting to Area 12, but it has bearing on Area 11. Is an alert guard named Burkett, who's a lawful evil male human veteran. If he sees intruders approaching, he will wait until they are halfway through the spinning cylinder and then ignite the slippery oil with a flaming arrow. And we'll get into that damage here in a minute. So this is when we talk about White Plume Mountain being a funhouse style adventure, this is straight out of a funhouse, right? Just a very, very weird, but also very enticing and interesting. So I gave the party a perception check. This isn't in the book. I just threw it out there. So give me a DC 15 perception check. And if they succeeded, and a few players did, I said, you realize that kind of sliding across the bottom would probably work better than walking across. So I gave them that kind of heads up. Now, one player started lobbying to leave. He's like, well, he kind of got a bad feeling. His danger sense started going off. And he's like, let's go back and go north. We can always come back this way if you need to, but let's go back and go north. And the party took a vote, and they decided to go through the spinning cylinder. So, really the instincts of that one player is like, let's just go north. We're good. But the party, shiny, being a D&D party, wants to check this out, and I don't blame them. So the first character, they kind of talked about it, they thought about it, they looked at it, and then one character, kind of a dwarf rogue who's joined the party when my other player came back, named Grimy Jenkins. He's very filthy, disgusting, like dwarf that is always fixing stuff and tinkering and stuff. He just said, I'm just going to go through like a slip and slide. So literally, he's jumping through and just through it. And I said, okay. And so what's supposed to happen is a flaming arrow is supposed to shoot in when they're halfway across. But I said, okay, tell me what everybody's doing, because I was trying to get a consensus. If a group of them was coming through, I was going to have the flaming arrow hit then. But if just one character was shooting through, I was going to say that the flaming arrow is not going to hit on that. I just kind of ruled that the first character shot through so quickly when he's kind of the guards kind of looking through this arrow slit. That he didn't really get a chance to get the arrow off, or maybe he's waiting for a larger group to catch more. And also, I like to kind of messing with the players' heads. They're like, oh, well, the first guy made it through okay, right? First guy made it through, we're fine. So I had the flaming arrow shoot when the second character, who I think was the bard, went through. Also doing the same thing, kind of a slip and slide kind of thing. Now, the first character that made it through, the dwarf, Grimy Peters, I have to look up his name. It's Grimy something. And the player he always does very interesting characters online. He's the same player who had the blind rogue in Out of the Abyss. So and I said, you got kind of a oily substance on you. And he says, is it flammable? And I just said, you're not sure, because I didn't want to give away. Now, if he would have said, I really want to know, I would have given him a roll, but I just want, you're not sure. And he just kind of left it at that. And he's, checking this. There's a door right there going north, right at the end of the passageway. And he's checking that for traps and stuff. So the second character decides to shoot through, doing the slip and slide. And that's when I had the arrow shoot. And he got caught full in that. So the way this works is the arrow hits. The oil burns for 2d4 rounds, so 2 4-siders, if the fire is not extinguished. And my players didn't do anything to try to extinguish the fire. On the first round, the burning oil deals an average of 9 or 2 8-siders, 2d8 fire damage to any creature that enters the spinning cylinder or starts its turn in the cylinder. On later rounds, it deals much less damage. It deals an average of 2 or 1 4-sider, 1d4 fire damage to such creatures. So the first round that you're caught in it, it can deal up to 16, minimum of 2, up to 16 fire damage. But then subsequent rounds is just 1 4-sider worth of damage. So he kind of flamed through and put out his, flames and all that. And everybody on the other side was like, wow. And the character that was over first, he's still checking the door, and he's like, because he's intent on the door, and he just hears this whoomph and feels heat, and he's like, what? And kind of turns around and sees this guy patting out fires. He didn't see the arrow, but I did rule that, just for the heck of it, that all the other players saw the little arrow slit shoot out the arrow. And so the second character over, after he got his flames put out, he looks and the arrow slit, and I don't think the book says this specifically, but I just ruled it shut in a seamless manner so that you couldn't really detect it from the rest of the wall. Let's see what it actually says about the slit. If he sees intruders approaching, he will wait until they are halfway through the spinning cylinder and then ignite the slippery oil with a flaming cylinder. After Burkett shoots, he then warns his lover, the wizard Starla, to close and lock the shutter over the arrow slit and to move to defend the door that adjoins the corridor. Then they stand ready to engage anyone that enters. So they do specifically say, shut that arrow slit. So anyway, okay. So the second character is like trying to find the arrow slot, and it's obvious that that's shut. So what happened next was, and this kind of surprised me. I figured everybody would just wait for the fire to burn out, but they didn't. I did tell them that it looked like it was burning much less intensely. So a couple of characters just slip and slided through and just basically said, we'll take the fire damage. One of them actually rode, like the cleric wrote it on their shield, just kind of for dramatic effect. So, and then another one, I think, just slip and slided. So you get 4 characters on the other side of this cylinder, on the east side of the cylinder, before this door going north, and it's a 10 by 10 square grid. There's 4 5-foot square grid slots. So you can only fit 4 characters if you don't get that door open and start pushing into area 12. So on the other side of the cylinder, there's only room for 4 characters of the size that would take up 1 grid slot, 1 5-foot grid slot. So after all these 4 characters got over there, the other characters were kind of effectively blocked from coming over at this point. Now, given the movement rules, I guess it's possible somebody could have, if they had the right amount of movement or whatever, could have gone all the way through the cylinder, got to the other end, did something, and then used their movement to get back into the cylinder or get, all the way to the other end, western end of the cylinder. That's a possibility, but, you can't get all the way over and then stay if there's already 4 characters there, unless there's some sort of magical ability involved. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, here are some cylinder dynamics that I came up with. This stuff was not in the book, but based on the players asking me questions and also stuff they were doing and attempting, these are some on the spot kind of rulings I came up with regarding this spinning cylinder. Okay, so I ruled that first of all, if somehow you were in the cylinder and you wanted to cast a spell. Now, this was contingent on that you made the DC 20 acrobatics check to walk into the cylinder and maintain your footing. If you had done that and you also wanted to cast a spell, then you would have to make a DC 10 acrobatics check to be able to cast a spell inside the cylinder, assuming that there was a, is it a somatic? If there was a somatic component where you had to do hands and all that, you know, you had to take a further DC 10 in order to cast a spell inside the cylinder. Now, this stuff may not come up in your version of White Plume Mountain, but it's just stuff that came up in mine that, you know, again, the players were asking stuff or doing stuff, so and I'm like, hey man, they're in this cylinder that's just spinning 10 feet a second or whatever, so, you know, there's going to be some dynamics in this thing. You can completely disregard this stuff if it doesn't fit how you want to do it. I ruled that if characters wanted to continue standing in the cylinder beyond one round, for some reason they wanted to walk in there and then stay, they had to continue the next turn, the next round, their turn on the next round, they had to do an additional DC 20 acrobatics check to stay standing. Now, I didn't make that their action, but that's what they would have to do to stay standing, or else they would go prone. I ruled that any character that spent more than one turn in the cylinder, so more than one round basically, in the cylinder, prone or on their rear, was at disadvantage in all checks for one turn after exiting, because they're just kind of, they're maybe, spinning on the bottom of it or getting bounced around. It's not a pleasant experience if you stay in there any extended amount of time, and if you're not making your acrobatics check and standing up. So that just, they get out and they're dizzy and disoriented, and so there's just disadvantage on everything. Maybe not a constitution check, right? Something that's inherently part of their nature, but anything like attacks or trying to hit something or doing any, kind of action that would require a check. I said they were at disadvantage. And then I also ruled, because this came up a couple of times, because while all this was going on, the characters that were already on the opposite end, on the eastern end, where the door to Area 12 was, they had gotten the door open and the fight began with the two enemies that are inside Area 12. So a lot of the reasons this came up is because they're like, well, can I get down there? Can I participate? Can I do something? And so I ruled that you could not see the door to Area 12 or the enemies, because the fight, the way my fight unfolded, is the enemies just stood in the door the whole time and the characters were fighting them from that little 10 by 10 square area on the eastern end of the cylinder. I said characters could not see the door or the enemies that were in Area 12 unless they were at least halfway down the cylinder. And then they could kind of see and maybe do something ranged or do a verbal attack or something like that. If they had some kind of ability, whatever. So that was, and by verbal attack I mean like vicious mockery or whatever, some of the bard spells or whatever. So that was kind of how I ruled things. And you might even have, if somebody's wanting to sit in the middle on their butt, shooting a bow and arrow, you might have to go even deeper. I didn't have to go that deep. So that's that was how I handled that spinning cylinder. And it's it would be better, I guess, in retrospect, for the characters to be able to get that door down and push the opponents back and get into that room and let the other people come down the cylinder and get in. But the way it worked out, I mean, that those two, it says that move to defend the door that adjoins the corridor. They stand ready to engage anyone that enters. So I mean, that's straight by the book in Area 12. They stand there and defend that door. So I mean, you could thunder wave them or something, or you could push them, or some grapple them and move them, something. Okay, so here's Area 12. This is Area 12, Burkett's guard post. Burkett's the lawful evil male human veteran. Watching through the arrow slit at the end of the passage, and this is on page 101 and 102 of Tales from the Yawning Portal, the White Plume Mountain stuff. Watching through the arrow slit at the end of the passage is an alert guard named Burkett, lawful evil male human veteran. If he sees intruders approaching, he will wait until they are halfway through the spinning cylinder and then ignite the slippery oil with a flaming arrow. I've already gone over the arrow damage. Okay, 2d8 first round, 1d4 subsequent rounds until it burns itself out. And the other characters that were like, hey, can I go halfway down? Can I do this? Can I do that? The fire had burned out by that point. They weren't just in there goofing around. And I did have one character that was very good at acrobatics and made it all the way to the end, and you know, would sit there for 2 or 3 rounds making acrobatics checks and standing on their feet, and I think they got a spell off. It's crazy. So at DC 20 to stand in there, and then another 8 DC 10 acrobatics to cast a spell. But anyway, so after Burkett shoots, he then warns his lover, the wizard Snarla, to close and lock the shutter over the arrow slit and move to defend the door that adjoins the corridor. They stand ready to engage anyone that enters. Snarla is a werewolf. Get it? Snarla? Okay, anyway, so Snarla is a werewolf. Her intelligence is 16 plus 3, and she has the following additional features, which increase her challenge rating to 5, 1800 XP. Snarla, she has spellcasting. Snarla is a 6th level spellcaster. Her spellcasting ability is intelligence. Spell save DC 14 plus 6 to hit with spell attacks. She has the following wizard spells. I'm not going to go through all of her spells here. If Burkett is killed, or if Snarla finds herself in a bad situation, she changes into werewolf form and attacks with desperate savagery, giving her advantage on all her attack rolls. If she is captured alive, this didn't happen in my game, but if she is captured alive and made to talk, she will tell the party only that she is charged with keeping the Kelpies and other denizens of the dungeon fed. There are strange gaps in her memory concerning her employer or any section of the dungeon other than her own. She has never been past the doors at Area 14. Those are the flood doors. Burkett knows even less than she does. So, there you go. Yeah, Area 14 is the flood doors leading up to the boiling lake with the force-filled bubble and the giant crab where Wave is at. Okay, treasure. The room has a couple of benches and a table on which are a large candlestick worth 10 gold pieces and Snarla spellbook. Let's say it again. Snarla. Okay. The book contains the spells that she has prepared and no others. It is protected by an explosive runes glyph of warding that deals 5d6 fire damage. Okay, so that's Area 12. Now, the fight basically, went, they basically just, the 4 characters that had made it over, got the door open, I think threw the door open or something, and there's Burkett, the lawful evil male veteran, and then there's Snarla, and they're fighting. And Snarla's first thing, she cast haste on Burkett, and I think she got off a magic missile as well in another round on somebody. But the haste, because Burkett already gets 3 melee attacks per round, and the haste is a really nice thing to cast on him because that gives him even another one. But somebody dispelled magic on that haste pretty quick, so that haste only lasted like a round. But it was still nice while it lasted, and I think she did get off a magic missile. And after that, they were taking enough damage, and the battle was going badly enough that I just had her wolf out. And everyone was like, wow, they're just thinking they're dealing with a female magic user, and then boom, all of a sudden she's a werewolf. So, which was fun. It was a fun fight. I didn't expect it to be overwhelmingly challenging or dangerous. But if there had only been like 4 of them at level 6, it could have been, a dangerous fight. But, the party as a whole, plus you had people, kind of providing a little bit of support. The 4 that were in front of the door, then you had people providing support. And, now the rogue, the dwarven rogue almost went down because Snarla kept attacking him because he kept attacking Snarla. So Snarla and Burkett kept attacking the rogue because he's doing all that sneak attack damage because he had somebody right next to him. And, he would have gone down without a heal thrown on him. I think maybe they threw a couple of heals on him. But overall, it's typical. They wore down the enemy and defeated them. So here's a couple of questions I had about Snarla that kind of went through my thing. I'm curious in general, can a werewolf cast spells while they're in lycanthrope form? I'm curious. I'm kind of thinking no, but I'm not sure if there's anything that explicitly says that, and I haven't gone and reread the lycanthrope rules or anything like that again. But, normal werewolves can't cast spells, but Snarla's spellcasting ability, plus the fact that she gets those if she's in a desperate situation, she gets attacks with advantage, bumped her up to challenge rating 5 from a challenge rating 3 for a normal werewolf. Not that there's anything normal about a werewolf. So I just kind of had that thought: can a werewolf even cast spells in lycanthrope form? I'm curious if there's an official ruling on that out there, what other people's thoughts are. Now the party put a walloping on her, big time. But I ruled, because the party's basically OP for this encounter, and I didn't want to add extra opponents into the mix. But I ruled she stayed up no matter how much damage she took until she got to at least attack one round with all that advantage. So they had dropped her, easily the round before. But I just left her up at 1 hit point until she could get off those. It says that, Burkett's killed her. Starla finds herself in a bad situation. She attacks with desperate savagery, giving her advantage on all her attack rolls. So I wanted to let her go out that way. Also, I saw some sage advice. I don't think it's the official sage advice from D&D, if there even is one. I think there is, but there's a Tumblr and a Twitter account that collects answers from people at D&D, like rules clarifications, and somebody had asked, what do you do when you have a really large party, which directly applies to my situation. And one of the things I think like Matt Mercer and like Chris Perkins and some other people recommended was use the average for the enemies. Use the average damage instead of rolling every time. Just use average damage for their attacks and keep moving. Because like in 5th edition, they give you, say this is how much you roll for damage, but it gives you the average. 2d8, but the average is 9. So I just started doing that. And it did seem to make things go a little smoother. I just said, you take this much damage, you take this much damage. So I'm trying that out. And I thought it worked out pretty well. But anyway, so I kept her up until she got off that one savage advantage attack. And then the very next hit she took, she went down. So, and I did that just to make it slightly more challenging for the party. Now, one character did get bit. That rogue, the dwarven rogue, who was, sneak attacking like crazy, did get bit. And with werewolves, if you get bit, you make a DC 12 Constitution saving throw, and if you fail it, you contract lycanthropy. So I asked that character, I said, you have been bit. You must make or I asked that player, I said, you must make a DC 12 Constitution saving throw. I said, do you want to do that in secret, or do you want to do that in front of everybody? And they said, I'll just do it in front of everybody. They rolled, and they failed. So that character has contracted lycanthropy. So I've got to decide how to deal with that. I'm not sure if anybody in the party has high enough spells or whatever at this point to cure that. Like, I know full-on restoration, I think, will cure it. I'm not sure if lesser restoration will. Okay, so so that battle was over, and the wizard went straight for that spell book and set off the explosive glyph of warding, and it went out into a 20-foot, I think, sphere. So it blew out, and it caught 4 characters in the blast. It's like, and everybody was sad. They were like, and it was the newer player who's still learning the ropes. And, like, really? You just went for another wizard spell book? So, and that's one good thing about playing these classic adventures. It kind of teaches you the tropes, the ground rules of dungeoneering, if you will. Don't just go throw open another wizard spell book. You never know what's going to happen. So, and somebody asked, I went and looked, and it doesn't appear that glyph of warding, the explosives, affects the spell book itself. It just blasts out. There was nothing I saw reading in there that would indicate that it consumes or damages the spell book. So, all right, so the party took a short rest in Area 12 without going to Area 13, which is the door to the north. They just went in and took a short rest. Got some, in some cases, spells back, hit points back, maybe reset some abilities. And then they went to Area 13. So Area 13 is Snarla's sanctum. Under the room, so you get that door to the north. Unlike the room you just left, this place is beautifully decorated. The floor is covered by fine rugs, the walls by erotic tapestries. After the Kelpies, boy, in this book, this is a PG-13 adventure, boys and girls. Erotic tapestries and shimmering curtains, the ceiling by an intricate mosaic depicting a summer sky dotted with fleecy clouds. In the northeast corner is a large and lavishly covered bed strewn with cushions. Next to it on a low table is a buffet of sweetmeats, cakes, and other delicious-looking comestibles. In the northwest corner of the room is a brass-bound oak chest. Anyone who tries out the bed will find that it feels quite uncomfortable, and anyone who samples the food will be disappointed in the extreme, finding it tough and not very tasty. In fact, the room is covered in illusions. A true seeing spell or similar illusion piercing magic reveals that the opulent bed is only an old straw mattress, and the delicious treats are just ordinary rations. The walls, floor, and ceiling of the room are quite bare. A dispel magic spell will automatically remove the illusion. Now, one thing that came up, they cast detect magic, and there was some discussion, would detect magic reveal that you're in an illusion? And I may rule differently in the future, but for this case, I think, yeah, I ruled that the whole room's kind of glowing, like everything's kind of outlined, has the dispel magic glow or the detect magic glow on it, and so they cast dispel magic, and they saw that they were in the room as it really was, and not the illusion. But I mean, with detect magic, it usually causes like objects or other things, magical effects or whatever, to glow. But would an illusion glow? And in this case, I ruled it did. I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on that. So, all right, and then the treasure in here, only the brass-bound chest appears as it actually is. The chest must be opened while uttering a command word known only to Starla, or it will emit a stinking cloud spell that lasts for 1 minute. Inside are 400 electrum pieces, 300 gold pieces, and 7 gems worth a total of 1,300 gold pieces. So they checked it for traps. I said you don't detect any traps because there's not a physical trap on this thing. And I guess I could have said that the chest glows with magic because it's magically warded, but I didn't think to do that, and I didn't get called on it by the players. But they opened it up, the stinking cloud erupted. They fled the room, and I ruled that it basically just stayed inside Area 13, Starla's sanctum. And they could have waited out the stinking cloud. They didn't know it only stayed a minute, but the Dwarven rogue, and dwarves have resistance to poison damage, and they also get advantage on poison saves, said he kind of covered up his mouth with something and went in there. And I just went ahead and said, well, give me a saving throw, and he resisted, so he didn't get any poison effects. So it just made him puke and reel, like retch, and blah. But he was fine, so he just drugged the chest out, and they got the treasure and everything. So anyway, that's basically what happened this session. They went back to the kind of, where the north, it's going north to where Wave is, or they could go east to the spinning cylinder. They just went back to that junction, and they're prepared to go north towards Wave, which they don't definitely know it's Wave, but they can strongly suspect. And this next episode, it doesn't have to be necessarily deadly, but it can get deadly very quickly, very swiftly, with this this area where Wave is. So I'm curious to see how next session goes. If they do something dumb, or if the dice go just kind of bad, they can die really quick. So I'm curious to see what will happen. Thanks so much for watching Shane Plays note series on White Plume Mountain, updated to 5th edition from Tales from the Yawning Portal. Please leave this video a comment and a thumbs up. It helps me out. It's hard to state or overstate how important that is for YouTube, getting extra visibility to these. They see thumbs up, thumbs down, and comments, all as engagements, and they assume if it's getting engagements that will, hey, this is relevant, more people should see this video. So that's why I always ask that. But you don't have to, but I don't mind if you do. I appreciate it very much. We will catch you next time, and thanks for watching on Shane.